Hello, this is the Philosophical Rebellion Substack. Today, I want to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict because a lot of the American population has been tricked by widespread propaganda in the mainstream media into supporting radical religious fundamentalists engaged in genocidal war crimes. We even had a wanted war criminal give a joint address to the United States Congress with over 30 standing ovations. That war criminal was wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity, including directing attacks against a civilian population, the use of starvation as a weapon of warfare against civilians, as well as inhumane acts, which included blocking pain medicine from the population that he was actively bombing. Meaning that when people had severe burns or needed amputations, they were unable to have any pain medication to help them through that. I'm talking, of course, about the government of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. So there's a few main points about the conflict that I want to reiterate. This conflict did not start on October 7th. There's a lot of propaganda that has gone into the October 7th narrative. So first of all, the mass rape claim has been investigated and debunked. The beheaded babies or babies in ovens claim has been investigated and debunked. The burning people alive claim has been investigated, and what actually happened was that the Israeli tanks that were sent in to go rescue Israeli citizens actually fired on those citizens. So an Israeli tank shell blew up Israeli citizens on October 7th. What else happened was Israeli Apache helicopters dispatched to the Nova Music Festival opened fire on Hamas militants and the people at the festival. Israeli Apache helicopters unloaded 28 entire weapons payloads on Hamas militants and Israeli civilians at that festival. All the cars that were blown to bits and charred up were done by the Israeli military, not by Hamas. So yes, Hamas did kill many Israeli civilians that day, but so did the IDF. And based on what we know now, it is most likely that Hamas targeted legitimate military sites of the Israeli military, and while some civilians got caught in the crossfire, they were not the target of the attack. What actually happened was the IDF retaliated against Hamas and ended up killing probably more of their own civilians than Hamas even took out. So that is why the Israeli government has been preventing investigations into October 7th. So, with the fact that Hamas attacked Gaza military installations of the IDF, that radically changes the narrative already. Because rather than barbaric savages who were just out there to cause as much pain to Israelis as possible, it actually presents Hamas in a different light. The light that they paint themselves in their official narrative, equates them with America's founders, who were labeled as terrorists to the British Empire. So just like America's founders were labeled as terrorists when they were fighting back against colonial occupation, Hamas is also labeled as a terrorist organization when in reality they are an armed resistance group fighting for the liberation of the Palestinian people from Israeli colonization. More specifically, Hamas has claimed that they are invoking their right to armed resistance against an Israeli apartheid occupation. Preceding October 7th, it was the consensus of the world's leading human rights organizations that Israel was an apartheid state. Amnesty International came to that conclusion. Human Rights Watch came to that conclusion. Subject matter experts appointed by the United Nations Office of Human Rights came to that conclusion. The Israeli human rights group B'Tselem came to that conclusion. Nearly every legitimate human rights group on earth came to that conclusion, that Israel had been enacting an apartheid occupation of occupied Palestinian territory. So that's actually how most of the rest of the world views this conflict. And that is why China at the International Criminal Court presented their argument that Hamas's actions should not be viewed as terrorism when they were actually invoking their legitimate right to armed resistance. So those two facts alone, that for all we know, Hamas used October 7th to attack legitimate Israeli military targets, combined with the fact that Israel had been conclusively found to be committing an apartheid occupation, which has also been confirmed by the International Court of Justice, reframes October 7th in a vastly different light than what has been presented by the mainstream media. So the next point is what has happened since October 7th. Because a lot of the claims have been totally false, and people believe that Israel is acting in self-defense, trying to specifically target Hamas, but the exact opposite has happened. This has been a collective punishment campaign against all of the civilians in Gaza. The Israeli government has been indiscriminately bombing Gaza, destroying all of the civilian infrastructure. They've been systematically targeting hospitals and water desalination plants while enacting a blockade to prevent food and medicine from entering the Gaza Strip. So I want to talk about the death count because it continued rising for just a few months. Then this conflict has carried on with the death count barely rising at all. And there's a reason for that, because just like Israel specifically targeted humanitarian aid workers like the World Central Kitchen workers, they also targeted the Palestinians who were trying to keep an official death toll. So what happened was they kept getting worse and worse and killing more and more people, and there was less and less reporting on it. But this is the important part to remember, because Donald Trump gets the most well-sourced population estimates that the United States military could possibly create. So his estimates right now are the gold standard, and he wants to relocate 1.7 to 1.9 million Palestinians out of Gaza. Those were his estimates, 1.7 to 1.9 million. On October 7th, the population of Gaza was almost 2.3 million, meaning the actual official death toll is more likely in the 400 to 600,000 range. Combine that with the fact that Israeli leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu are wanted by the International Criminal Court. Organizations like Amnesty International have found Israel guilty of the crime of genocide. And there has also been a United Nations special committee created to answer the question of whether or not Israel is guilty of genocide. They have concluded that Israel has been engaged in genocide. Organizations like Human Rights Watch have found the Israeli government guilty of crimes like extermination. And these are crimes Benjamin Netanyahu has spent his entire career trying to facilitate. He came to power opposing the Oslo Accords. So even the most minor of concessions Israel could have made for peace with the Palestinians, he opposed that. Because he wants sole Jewish Israeli control of the entire territory from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And he has been spending his entire career trying to facilitate Israeli military action in order to annex that entire territory. And he has been fine with ethnic cleansing, just displacing all the Palestinians, and his fallback plan has always been to exterminate them through genocide. That has been Benjamin Netanyahu's final solution for the Palestinians. So here's where we are today. Donald Trump serves money above all else, and he has taken $100 million from Miriam Adelson to support Benjamin Netanyahu's military aim to annex that entire territory. So Trump's doing that. He's even promised to go a step further, using the United States military for a long-term military occupation in the Middle East to ethnically cleanse Palestinians out of Gaza, forcibly relocate them somewhere else in the Middle East, and annex the entire territory for real estate development, probably by organizations like the ones Jared Kushner is involved in. So here's the third most important point that the American people need to consider. The International Criminal Court was created during Bill Clinton's administration. He said we should wait and see before joining. The next president was George W. Bush, who used the pretense of 9/11 to launch multiple illegal offensive wars in countries that did not attack us, while avoiding attacking the one country who did legitimately attack us. So George Bush would have rightfully been prosecuted and convicted by the International Criminal Court. But instead what happened was he and the people in Congress at the time created the Hague Invasion Act. saying that the United States military would go to war against our ally, the Netherlands, if the International Criminal Court ever dared to hold an American war criminal accountable for their war crimes. And that Hague Invasion Act stays in place today. And that is why Donald Trump feels so emboldened to proclaim that he is going to ethnically cleanse Gaza and annex the entire territory himself. Because this whole international rules-based system has always been a facade. Because the United States refuses to allow our own elected officials to be prosecuted for war crimes they commit. So right now, the United States government is fully supporting an apartheid state engaged in genocidal war crimes, with our president committing to not only continue supporting those war crimes, but now he is going a step further and promising to commit his own war crimes. So we have a situation where every single president of the 21st century, George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and now Trump again, would be prosecuted and convicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes if we allowed our politicians to be held accountable for the crimes that they commit. And this is so far from a reality right now, but I say lock them up. The United States needs to join the ICC. And as Donald Trump commits an ethnic cleansing campaign on behalf of a genocidal apartheid state, engaging the United States military in another Middle East quagmire, that's what the American people need to start discussing. Should we actually have our leaders held accountable for the war crimes that they commit? To me, the answer is an emphatic yes.